I am a 33 years old female, have been engaged to my fiancé, 37 male, for 5 months. We don't share finance because that's what he wants. I got a raise on my salary. Now I earn 30% more than he does, and I notice that he's been using this to ask me to pay for him and his friends. Whenever I say no, or why should I pay for this, he'd respond with the 30%, that's why. He acts as if the 30% is unfair or that I'm not deserving of it. Several times he has tricked me to pay for his and his friends' meals by asking me publicly. Let me say that I'm too nice to say no. I hate confrontation, especially when we're at a public place like a restaurant, so I just grin and pay. Last Tuesday, he asked me to join him and his buddies for dinner. I told him from the start I wasn't paying for their food and he shouldn't expect me to. He said he got this and no worries. We got to the restaurant, met his friends, ordered food. And in the middle of the meal he leaned in and whispered that I would be paying for everything he and his friends ordered. I got so mad I whispered back, no. But he probably relied on me not causing a scene in public and in front of his friends. He said, you have enough money, you could pay for everyone's food, 30%, remember? I was fuming inside. Instead of reacting negatively and losing my temper, I waited till the bills arrived. They were already split from the start when we first ordered. I paid for mine, then I excused myself to the restroom. I then sneaked out from there, got into my car and went home. I started getting phone calls from my fiancé, then texts asking where I was. I texted back saying I didn't appreciate how he put me in this situation and basically tricking me into paying for his and his friends' food. I told him I went home, then stopped replying. An hour later he came and started yelling at me, calling me selfish, irrational, cheapskate and childish for sneaking out like that and leaving him stuck with a bill he could not pay. He had to call his brother for help. We had a loud argument, then he walked out. His friends didn't speak to me on this, but he told me they're disappointed in my behavior and are telling him to take time and reflect on the type of woman he's gonna be married to. He said that because the restaurant wasn't expensive, then I could have just paid. He admitted not telling me about it till later, knowing I'd refuse. He still thinks my reaction was childish and unacceptable. University is starting back soon, so many of my friends started moving back to town. I am 17 female, live in a house with 5 friends. I wasn't born in the UK but moved here with my parents when I was 17. We come from another European country, so I speak my native language, English, which is far from perfect. I've been learning Spanish and English since I was little, and my Spanish is better than my English. I don't have an obvious accent in English, people just assume that I am Canadian. We had a small party on Saturday and one friend brought his new girlfriend, Jess. Jess 20, and she's the reason why I am posting here. Jess made sure to let everyone know that she's a polyglot and speaks multiple languages. I was obviously impressed. I study modern languages, meaning that I'm learning Italian and German on top of Spanish. And obviously I asked what languages she speaks: Spanish, Japanese, Arabic, my native language, German, Korean, and French. I told her how impressed I was and carried on with my evening. I had a short phone call with my mom, whom I obviously speak to in my native tongue, and I went out of the house to talk to her. Jess was out in the garden and heard my conversation, and she corrected me on my pronunciation. I told her that she was in the wrong and she insisted that she knows better. I didn't fancy getting into any arguments, so I ignored her and went back inside saying whatever. Later, I bumped my head and swore loudly in Spanish. I tend to code switch a lot when drunk, and she corrected my pronunciation, which was funny because it was her who was incorrect. I ignored her again. A while later I wanted my friend, who is from Spain, to hand me something, but I forgot how it's called in English. So I said, hand me Spanish word, please, knowing my friend would understand. Jess decided to correct me again, using completely incorrect word. My friend and I looked at each other, and me being drunk, I lost any self-control I had. I spoke to Jess in Spanish asking her what the hell she thinks she's doing. And she looked at me telling me that my Spanish was so wrong that she didn't understand a word. It wasn't, but okay. So I told her the same thing in my native tongue, to which she replied with the same thing. I laughed at her and told her it's my native language and she really shouldn't lie about being a polyglot and correcting people when she doesn't actually speak those languages. She was fuming. She tried to grab her boyfriend's hand and leave with him, but he was too drunk to care and just said, "Told you to stop lying." I don't know how she got my number, but she called me this morning screaming what an asshole I am to humiliate her like that, and if she knew I spoke the language, she wouldn't have corrected me. I do feel bad now. I realize how humiliating this must have been for her, but on the other hand, she shouldn't have been lying. It's a complex situation, but I'll do my best to explain. I have a bio son, Leo, 16, from my previous relationship. I married his stepmom, who is a mother of 2 boys, Connor, 20, deceased, and Derek, 12. I've never had the pleasure to meet Connor, who tragically passed away from a motorcycle accident. Derek was so devastated by this loss, and although it's been years, he's still pretty much grieving. I've seen tons of pictures and videos of Connor and made efforts to get to know who he was as a way to share Derek's grief, and be there for him to lend an ear and a comforting shoulder. It's safe to say that Derek and I grew a strong bond in no time. But my son Leo isn't close to Derek. Understandable, because not all siblings and step-siblings are the same. Leo and Derek are different in everything, which isn't a bad thing, but Leo calls himself the brutally honest type, and makes insensitive comments about Derek most of the time. They tend to be under the guise of advice. Derek never complained, so I had to step in and tell Leo to stop being insensitive towards his stepbrother, especially with everything regarding Connor and his memory. Leo would say, "Okay, I get it, and I won't do it again." Days ago, Leo wanted to hang out with friends and asked Derek if he wanted to join. Derek agreed and put on Connor's hoodie before going out. Leo commented on the hoodie and called it ugly and asked him to put on something else, but Derek insisted on wearing it or not go. Leo dropped it. Hours later, Derek came home crying with his hoodie in hand. He said Leo and friends cut it into pieces while he was in the bathroom after they convinced him to take it off. I was furious. I asked Leo, and he said it was his friend's idea, then said he had to do it since Derek wears it everywhere, and it looked old and embarrassing. I reminded him who this hoodie belonged to, and he said, "So what? Maybe this will help him move on in life." I told him his birthday was cancelled and his friends aren't welcome anymore. He pitched a fit saying his birthday was a right, not a privilege, and I can't cancel it. He had my ex criticize my decision and wanted to host his birthday party, but I refused because he's grounded, so no party anywhere. She and her family called me awful and ridiculous and asked me to think how Leo will hate me for this, but I insisted he needed punishment for putting his stepbrother through this. My name is Mary, and I'm expecting my first baby with my husband. This is the first grandchild in the family, in-laws, and they said that if the baby's a boy, then we'll give him my father-in-law's name. He's dead due to cancer. I had no problem with that. This happened before we found out the gender of the baby. My husband and his family had me do things like attend prayers and do other rituals before the reveal at the doctor's. I didn't like that, but went with it to keep the peace. DR appointment came, and it turned out to be a girl. My husband cried in the car, then turned his phone off to hide from his family, then finally told them. His mom and the others made their frustration and disappointment clear, which bothered me cause my daughter deserves to be celebrated, but they ghosted me for days, then started coming over and visiting, constantly referring to my daughter as my son, claiming the results were false and basically pretending it's a boy. I had severe fights with them after they refused to stop it. And my husband sided with them despite seeing how wrong and unreasonable what they were doing was. We didn't speak for a while. Sister-in-law called to apologize, then informed me she arranged for a baby shower for me. I was so excited and happy. But when I arrived, I saw blue balloons, blue cake with father-in-law's name / decorations around. I was so confused I had to sit down. Sister-in-law explained they were still hoping the gender results are false and it's a boy. I looked at my husband and he agreed with her. I lost my temper and yelled at them all, calling them delusionals and telling them to stop treating my daughter like she's unwanted and act like she doesn't exist by throwing a party for their imaginary grandson. Mother-in-law broke down crying. I took my bag and walked out immediately. They started yelling and my husband followed me outside and started arguing about how I insulted his family and his dad's memory by acting like that. I told him to wake up and see the insanity in his family's behavior. He said they needed time to process the fact that it's a girl, not a boy, as they expected, and insisted I play along and they'll soon get over it. I said absolutely not and demanded he take me home. He said no, so I called an Uber and left. He was fuming. He called 15 times, then texted that he won't be coming home till I get my ass over and apologize for ruining everything and accusing them of being mentally unstable. I haven't responded yet. He's constantly pressuring me to get right with his family before we even talk about anything else.